Hey there guys, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to review the iPad 7th generation in 2021. Alright, now just to give you some specs on the iPad 7th generation. So the iPad 7th generation was released back in 2019, which actually wasn't too long ago, so just over a year now. Now, this iPad is the lower end iPad, so this is the budget iPad, so of course it came in at a pretty low price. It did come in two variants, so it came in Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi+Cellular, so you could have one that actually has LTE on it. It did also come in two different storage capacities as well. So the pricing for those came in at $329 for the 32 gig Wi-Fi model. Add $100 if you want 128 gigs, so that would make it $429 US. If you wanted cellular, that would be $459 for 32 gigs, and then add $100, so $559 for the 128 gig Wi-Fi plus cellular model. It did come in three different colors, so it came in silver, space gray, and gold. And the one I have here is the gold model right here. One change from the iPad 6th generation is an increase in screen size. So we went from a 9.7 inch display to a 10.2 inch display, and this has a resolution of 2160 by 1620. It is an IPS LED display and has a max brightness of 500 nits. So pretty good, especially for a budget iPad. Now, one other thing about this one that is different from the higher end iPads is this one is a non-laminated display. So what that basically means is that the display glass and the actual display itself are not fused together. Actually, it's not a bad thing either. You may notice the gap between the glass and the display, but it is a good thing for repairs. So if you did happen to break the glass on your iPad, it will cost you a lot less to replace it because most likely it's just the glass and not the display underneath. So for example, if you were to break an iPad that's a little bit more expensive than this one, you may be spending over $100 for a display replacement, while for this one, just the glass itself is probably $15 to $20, and then include, of course, the labor for replacing it. So it's not a bad thing to have a non-laminated display. For our processor in here, we are running an A10 Fusion chip. That is a dual-core chip on this one, and it does have 3 gigs of RAM. Now, the A10 chip came out back in 2016. It is shared with a couple of different devices, so the iPhone 7, iPhone 7 Plus, and it's also in the Apple TV HD. So you will probably see that chip in a couple things. It's also in the iPad 6th generation as well. The only difference between this one and the 8th generation iPad is the processor. That's literally the only difference. So if you were looking at this or the 8th generation, the only difference is the processor. So the 8th generation does have an A12 processor, which is going to be a little bit faster, but literally everything else is going to be the exact same. Cameras, RAM, everything else. Screen, all the things are going to be exactly the same. For our cameras on this, they're not the greatest, but of course this is an iPad. I don't know how many people actually use an iPad for their main camera, but if you need to take a picture with it, it's okay. You have a 1.2 megapixel on the front right here. That definitely could be better, but then on the back we have an 8 megapixel. Now on the higher end iPads, you're going to get a little bit better cameras on them, but on these, not the greatest cameras. For the battery in this, just like all iPads, Apple promises 10 hours of battery life, and this is no different. So it does have an 8,827 milliamp hour battery, and I believe it's actually the same as the iPad 6th generation, but it should still get you that full 10 hours that they promise. With the Wi-Fi model here, you do get 802.11 A, B, G, N, and AC, and you also get Bluetooth 4.2, and of course if you get a cellular model like this one, it will be unlocked so it can be used on any carrier. So you can use it on Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile, and of course, if you need to use it internationally, you can just pop a SIM card in there and you're good to go. So just to show you a quick difference between the iPad 6th generation and the iPad 7th generation, really, the only big difference here is the screen. So you're going from a 9.7 inch display on the 6th generation to a 10.2 inch display. So of course, the bigger display is probably better. And then everything else really is the same. So the cameras are the same, the processor is the same. This one does have 1 less gig of RAM as well. So this one does get 3 gigs of RAM over 2 gigs of RAM. But honestly, both of these are still pretty good iPads. So let's briefly talk about the design of the iPad 7th generation here. So I have the iPad 6th generation and 7th generation, and as you can see, they look pretty similar, and of course, as I said previously, the only difference is the larger screen here. So what may look also familiar here is that these look a lot like the older iPad Airs. So the iPad Air came out back in 2013, the Air 2 came out in 2014, and this is basically the design that they used for these base model iPads. And that's actually not a bad thing, it's a good design. So you're not really getting any crazy new design like some of the newer iPads that they offer. So like the recent iPad Air that they released, the 4th generation, that one is a completely new design, but also has a larger screen. But for these base model iPads, they use a familiar, well-loved design. So as we can see on the front here, we do have that 10.2-inch display surrounded by some pretty large bezels here. So on the top here, we do have our front-facing camera as well as ambient light sensor. And we have a large bezel up here, a little bit thinner on the sides, large bezel at the bottom, and we do have the home button down here. So if you were to get one of the newer iPads like the iPad Pro or the new iPad Air, it would look kind of like this. So this is the 3rd generation iPad Pro here. And this is literally all screen. Unlike the iPad Air, this one does have Face ID like the new iPhones. So as you can see, our bezels are a lot smaller on this compared to this. So taking a look at the side of the iPad here, you can see it is still very, very thin. If we go down here, you can see in the center we have 3 little pogo pins, and that is a smart connector, so that will connect to the new keyboards that they offer for these. So this was not present on the 6th generation, but it is on the 7th generation here. And that is all that's on this side. So basically, you would pop this onto the keyboard case right here, and that would connect to it that way. On this side, you'll see here we do have volume keys right here, and they are pill style, just like the iPhone right here. And if we go down, we have our SIM card slot as well. So, and another thing about this too is it is not squared off like the iPhone, so it is a rounded corner. And as you can see, it's all rounded around here. Our power button and sleep button is on the top right here. And then on the top here, you can see we have a little microphone as well as a 3.5mm headset jack. Now, one thing that's different on this model is this one is an LTE model, so it does have a strip on the top. Now, this will be white or black depending on the color of the iPad you choose. So because this is a gold one, it does have a white window on it. Now, it is a little different with the newer iPads. So the iPad Pro and Air, they have no window, but what they do is they have antenna bands integrated into the front or the top and the bottom of the iPad here. So that's just a little bit different. So this is more like the older style iPad. On the bottom here, you can see we do have our lightning connector as well as our speakers right here. Now, they did have an iPad Pro that had the 9.7-inch display. Looked really similar to this, but it had stereo speakers. It had speakers on the top and bottom, and the new iPad Air and the iPad Pros have speakers, as you can see, on the top and the bottom there, so you get them on both sides. So if you're watching something, you'd have them coming from both sides. So the iPad 7th generation does include, of course, the latest and greatest in iOS, so it includes iOS 14. So we get widgets, better note-taking with the Apple Pencil, as well as some other goodies. So, of course, it being only a year old, it is going to be up to date. This one does have iOS 14.2, but it's up to iOS 14.4 right now. So expect to get a good couple years of software updates for this one since it is still fairly new. Now, as far as performance is concerned with this iPad here, it does have an A10 processor, of course, and it does have 3 gigs of RAM. Our single core score on Geekbench is 766 and a multi-core score of 1421. Now, I did watch a couple videos comparing the 7th generation and the 8th generation, and if you're using this for editing photos or videos or that kind of thing, you will definitely notice a bump in speed if you go with the newer generation. That A12 is definitely a big upgrade over this one. But if you're looking to do basic tasks like social media, reading, watching videos, that kind of thing, this thing will run just great for you. All right, now let's go ahead and do a quick social media test on here just to see how quickly these run here. So first, I'll open up Twitter here. And as you can see, that starts up really quickly. Scrolling is good here. And of course, we have this much larger screen than our phone, so that's pretty nice also. If we wanted to just make a tweet here, pretty quick and easy. Tap the top here, we can go all the way home. Unfortunately, no fleets or anything crazy like that. This is the iPad version right here. Let's go ahead and do Instagram. Really funny, Instagram pops up like an iPhone app, so that's never gonna change apparently. But as you can see, that runs just fine as well. If you want to check out our camera here, here we go. That runs just fine. So you can still use Instagram even though it's in an iPhone app right here, but that runs just fine also. And then lastly, I'll check out TikTok here. And TikTok actually does have an iPad app, so that runs just fine as well. So as you can see, those start and run just fine, and it's muted because of course I don't want to get copyright striked. Alright, so now let's do a quick speaker test on the iPad 7th generation. So as I said previously, it does have stereo speakers, but only down here at the bottom. So you have two firing speakers down here, but you don't have any right here. So it's not really a stereo experience if you're watching it in landscape. So here is a quick speaker test on this iPad. So now let's talk about the display on the iPad 7th generation. So we do have an LED IPS panel. It is absolutely gorgeous, and of course Apple makes really good displays for their iPads no matter which one you get. Even though this is not a laminated display, it still has gorgeous colors and really good contrast ratio, and it's going to be very enjoyable to watch any content on. So I, for one, use my iPad for a lot of content consumption, so if you're using your iPad for that, you will definitely be happy, even with the lower budget end iPad here. So as you can see here from this sample video, it looks absolutely crisp and beautiful, and you should be able to watch, higher resolution content on it as well. So of course an iPad is not meant to be your main camera. It does include cameras, they're not great. We have a 1.2 megapixel on the front and an 8 megapixel on the back. And of course we don't have a flash or anything like that, so this is not going to be the greatest camera in the world here. But just wanted to show you a couple videos and pictures from the camera. So the iPad 7th generation is capable of doing video at 1080p at 30 frames per second. So nothing spectacular. We also have an 8 megapixel camera on here, so probably not going to be really used for the camera, but here's a quick sample anyway. And here's a quick sample of the front-facing camera on the iPad 7th generation. This one is only 1.2 megapixels, so it is not going to be the greatest quality, but if you need to take a selfie video, you can. So is the iPad 7th generation still worth it in 2021? I'd say definitely. Of course, it's still not that old, it's only a year old, but I would say the only reason you should look at something else is if you're looking at doing photo editing, video editing, that kind of thing. Definitely look into one of the iPads with a better processor. Even the 8th generation is going to have an A12 processor that'll be a little bit more capable of handling those kinds of workloads. However, the iPad 7th generation is still a workhorse, still offers that smart connector, so you can use the keyboard case. You also have the Apple Pencil that you can use with this, so you can use this for drawing or for school. And of course, media consumption is great on this as well. Now, of course, if you want better speakers, you might want to go to the Air because you're going to have stereo speakers versus having just the two on the bottom right here. And if you want the laminated display, you need to go the Air, but again, this for a budget price is still really good. Now, I got this one for $310 for a 32 gig cellular model, so that's pretty good. However, I noticed that on Swappa, they have the Wi-Fi model for $300. So it might not be worth it. It might be worth it if you're looking for a Wi-Fi model and you don't find it used for a good price, just go for the 8th generation. Half the time you're going to find those on sale, and you may be able to find them on sale for $250 for the 32 gig. So, and then if that's not on sale, then they have the education pricing, so that's $299 I think for that, for the 32 gig Wi-Fi model. So if you need a bare bones basic 32 gig Wi-Fi model, you can still get an 8th generation, for just a little bit more than the 7th generation. But if you find a good deal on this one, don't pass it up. Still a good deal if you can find it for a good price. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this quick video on the iPad 7th generation in 2021. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. And if you liked the video, hit that like button. If you want to see more like this, consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next one.